We're at the Commerce and Industry Association event. I was proud to moderate a discussion on leadership. Very dynamic discussion. One of our panelists, our distinguished panelist, Mike Maron, over at Holy Name, the leader there. It was very honest, Mike. I mean, it was all out there. Biggest takeaway for you on this leadership forum?
Well, to me, what was interesting is fascinating because it was unscripted. So the common threads that came up on their own between Ralph and Kathleen and myself were to me, was telling, right? That there are consistent attributes to good leadership that apply across the board. Doesn't matter what industry sector. So from public utilities to education to healthcare, it's all the same.
Yeah. By the way, it was Kathleen Waldron, who was the president of William Patterson University, and Ralph LaRosa, who is the president of PSEG. So it was a really dynamic discussion. One of the things that you said, I got to tell you, Mike and I have had lots of conversations on the air before about healthcare issues, but I want to delve into this leadership thing. You have said, and you said here, that a lot of your leadership style comes from the way you grew up, how you grew up, who you grew up around, and your values. Talk about that.
Yeah, so to me, it's a combination of hard work. In my household, if you had to, from the time you were 12 years old with the paper out, actually probably younger than that back then, on up through, I worked. I always worked. I had to sort of fend for myself and pay my way through college. And with that comes a drive and a willingness to want to do things. And you watch people, as I came up through the ranks, who were in leadership positions, just a question like why? Like, so why do they behave that way? Why don't they? I'm a peon right now. Why don't they give me the time of day? And early on, I remember vowing to myself that if I were ever in that position, I would never, ever treat people that way, because I didn't like it when I was there treated that way. So don't do it, when you have the opportunity to pay it back. And I've kind of lived by that my whole life.
One of the things that also came up in this discussion that Mike was really candid about was the whole question of humility. Mike brought this up. We're talking about leadership styles, and not to be self-promotional at all, but in my book, Lessons in Leadership, which was part of the basis for our discussion today, I talk about that and a lot of my leadership failures heading up different organizations. And you talked about that. We talked about Donald Trump and his leadership style, and it was not a political discussion at all. It was stylistic. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I think, to me, always, lessons come in one of two veins. You can do positive things that you want people to emulate, or people can do negative things that you don't want to repeat. And unfortunately, we're in a day and age where there's more negatives, right? And so in this environment, someone can have conviction, they can have passion, they can be willing to go against the grain. Those are all great leadership attributes, right? I believe in something, I'm going to be articulate about it, I'm going to be passionate and drive for it. The flip side of that is if you make yourself the center of that universe and you lose humility and you come across as arrogant and egotistical and have this superiority complex, you lose your audience. And so the good side of what you're trying to achieve gets lost, and it's too easily overshadowed by those negatives. It's incumbent on every leader, when they wake up in the morning, when they're looking in themselves in the mirror, to say, how am I going to conduct myself today, and what could I do better today that I didn't do yesterday? And if you're not challenging yourself and asking yourself those questions, then you're just missing the opportunity of today to do something better than you did yesterday.
But talk about that a little bit more. And I don't mean to be overly analytical or philosophical or engage in psychological mumbo jumbo here. But in all candor, you're talking about being very self-reflective and self-analytical. Is that the job of a leader, particularly the President of the United States, major corporation, to be that self-reflective?
Absolutely.
Don't you have to keep moving forward, Mike?
Yes, yeah, but in moving forward, it's not that you get out in a public forum and you're doing a mass confession every day. You're challenging yourself privately, right? And so you realize, especially someone like the President of the United States, I got a public aura I got to maintain. Right?
I got to show confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a world stage that I'm playing on, and there's a lot of it is theater, and I am playing to perception. But behind it all, right, there's a great quote that one of the nuns taught me years ago. It says, total power corrupts totally. Right? So it's so easy to get sucked in by those gravitational forces to say, I am powerful, I am influential, I end up becoming the center of my universe, however I'm going to define
That can happen to any leader, in a corporation, hospital, nonprofit, anything.
Doesn't matter. I could be a leader of a 50-person company or a 20,000-person company. I can be a community leader. It doesn't. That power corrupts. And if you can't look yourself in the mirror every day and say, today it's not going to corrupt me. Today I will hold it in abeyance and I will conduct myself in a way knowing that I have this influence, but knowing that I am only one of many in this chain, not the lead of the chain, not the center of the chain. That's the effective leader.
What keeps you humble?
That, realizing that there are so many other people who are so better than you, right? That you're part of a big connected world. And no matter where you go, I learned this in sports, right? You compete in sports, you think you want to be the best, you work hard. There is always will be someone who's a little faster, a little stronger, and a little better than you. Happens all the time, right? Every sport, you never dominate forever. So take those lessons and apply it into life and leadership. You have to be humbled by it, right? You got to realize there's always someone out there who's better than you.
Final question. Ever-changing world around us. You mentioned Dr. Spencer Johnson's Who Moved My Cheese. Mike told a great story about the book Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, all about change and the need to adapt to change. In the ever-changing healthcare environment, how important is it that leaders are constantly aware of change, adapting to change, and in fact, embracing change?
Critical. I mean, healthcare it's in a revolutionary state right now, and given everything else that's coming down the road, it's going to be even more disruptive, more of a revolution going on. If you can't cope with change, if you can't get comfortable with that and the pace of change, then as a leader, you're going to be grossly ineffective, and people are going to suffer as a result. So you have to be willing to disrupt comfort zones. You have to be willing to go out there and say, we're going to break these old paradigms. I'm not going to be a lemming. I'm not going to follow public trends. I'm going to apply critical thinking and logic, and I'm going to challenge. And then where I think that challenge is right, conviction, I'm going to follow it.
Makes people uncomfortable. Finally, Mike, it makes people real uncomfortable around you when you do that.
It does. It does. But that's where you as a leader have to be able to find that ability to do that and yet make them still feel comfortable, willing to follow you and say, I can do this.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Steve. It's great being here.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Russell Berry Foundation, the Northward Center, Adler Aphasia Center, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Wells Fargo, Verizon, and by ADP, transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.